Continental has already supplied us for 2026 with a new, very sporty road tire, the SportAttack 5. It is not only the performance of this tire that has been developed further, we have already reported on this tire in detail. Continental has also widened its range of use. And that is exactly why the overlap with the already well-known RoadAttack 4 has now become quite large. So the question now is, for which type of use should I choose which tire? And that is precisely why we are here today. To find out which tire is now ideally suited to which bike and to which type of rider, we came up with a test scenario. Of course, we were primarily riding on the road. For this test, we chose a Kawasaki Z900 as our main protagonist. It is a bike that can be ridden very sportily, sits in the middle performance range and is not overly stable by nature. And that is exactly what you need if you want to filter out how good and how stable a tire feels, how much grip it offers, and what kind of feedback it delivers back to the rider. So I believe we have a very good setup here. From Conti, as already mentioned, we have the SportAttack 5 versus the RoadAttack 4. What do these two tires have in common? The only thing they really have in common is the radial construction and a longitudinal belt at 0 degrees. And with that, the similarities are already over. Everything else is genuinely completely different. The RoadAttack has more or less its area of use on the road. It is intended for sporty touring, for sport touring bikes, and for heavier motorcycles. Here, the aim is to offer a high level of riding comfort. The SportAttack, on the other hand, already moves much more towards very sporty road use and also partly towards the racetrack. It has been designed for 80% road and 20% racetrack. That means that for the occasional visit to a track day, this tire is of course very well suited. We have already reported on that, but now let us take a closer look at the differences. But maybe we should first look at the construction of these tires in a little more detail. Both have a 90-degree radial construction, so they do not differ there. And both also have a 0-degree steel belt, which is wound in the longitudinal direction. And with that, however, the similarities are already over again. Everything else is really designed completely differently from the ground up. And to look at that in detail, we need to move a little closer to the tires. Now we have the two tires lying in front of us in detail. What is actually immediately obvious as a difference is the tread pattern. On the RoadAttack, we can see that it has a clearly higher proportion of tread and that the cuts are also carried much further out towards the outer edge. If we look at the SportAttack, we can see that tread has been saved there and that it has not been pulled out quite as far towards the shoulder. The aim with the RoadAttack was that through the stronger tread pattern, you get more movement in the tire and that the tire also reaches its basic operating temperature more quickly. With the SportAttack, the tread pattern is a little less pronounced and also not quite as deep. However, a lot of work has also gone into the compound so that the tire still holds well even in cold conditions. What also stands out when you look directly from above at these two tires is a different contour. It is not only in the construction, which also differs slightly and therefore also affects the internal flex of the tire, but also in the contour that a different shape has been chosen. With the RoadAttack, the goal was to give the tire a lot of self-damping, to make the turn in a little less sharp and abrupt. And for that reason, very soft carcasses were used, which then have a correspondingly positive effect on riding comfort. If you look at it closely, it is a very soft construction. And this construction naturally also allows the tire, even at lean angle, to absorb strong bumps in the road within itself and to introduce very little unrest into the handling of the bike. Many riders judge tires purely by grip and mileage, but there is still a great deal in between. And exactly what we have just looked at plays a major role there. The contour that the tire has by nature and the contour that it then manages to keep under load. It makes a difference whether I have a very stiff, hard construction here, which, let us say, builds up very round and deforms only slightly, compared with a very pointed construction, which then completely loses its shape under load because of very soft carcasses. And of course, tire pressure also plays a big role there. The stiffness of a tire like this naturally depends on the tire pressure, on the carcass construction itself, and also on the hardness of the rubber compound and the thickness of the rubber. We can see that the RoadAttack also brings noticeably more rubber with it here. We have roughly a 1.5 millimeter thicker layer of rubber. And that is also intended to provide additional mileage. Now, let us perhaps really come to the result as well and to how these tires felt different to ride. As we already mentioned at the beginning, the biggest difference between the tires is the rideability and the feeling that the tires convey to the rider. With the Z900, we have a bike here which is not overly stable by nature. You can really feel clear differences here. And this is also where these two tires differ the most, especially when it comes to wanting to generate stability and to bring a great deal of calm into the turn-in phase. This is where the RoadAttack shines across the board. It feels noticeably softer, it absorbs bumps and impacts a little more softly. It takes them into itself, and through that it gives the bike a lot of calmness and composure. You notice that particularly when you try to turn into a corner with pressure. It is not quite as sharp and snappy as you might perhaps expect, but in return it gives you stoic calm. And because of that, it naturally works brilliantly on bikes such as naked bikes, which react very sensitively to tire geometries that make them too agile, as we have already experienced with some tires. The RoadAttack then calms these bikes down enormously. In direct comparison, the SportAttack is much crisper here. It tips into the corner a little more quickly and more easily. However, it does not then give you quite the same grounded feeling and also not quite the same contact patch feeling at the front tire. So it gives bikes super light handling, but on geometries that do not bring that much stability with them by nature. I do not want to say they suffer from it, but they no longer have quite the same precision and calm that we get with the RoadAttack. And that already shows you that these are differences which have nothing to do with grip or mileage, but which transmit an incredibly strong feeling to the rider. And that feeling can go in very different directions. Of course, grip is always a big topic, so I would like to go into that once again as well. With the SportAttack, we have a very high performance tire, which also worked very well on the racetrack. We have already been able to test it quite extensively on the racetrack and also on different bikes. Its main area of use, however, is the road. The rubber compound was chosen in such a way that it also performs quite well in cold conditions. So the focus was not placed only on the racetrack, but also on the road. And in that respect, the two tires really are quite similar because on the one hand, with the sporty tire, we get very strong performance for the road. And on the other hand, the touring tire, as it is called, is no longer the compromise that people might remember from the past. A lot has also happened in terms of grip. When we are riding on smooth asphalt, the differences between these two tires are very marginal. There really is not much between them there, and the SportAttack cannot gain much of an advantage over the RoadAttack in that situation. In terms of cold running behavior, both are quite good. The RoadAttack perhaps has its nose slightly in front, also thanks to its larger amount of rubber and its deeper tread pattern, because it warms up a little more quickly. But the difference is only marginal. Where the grip differences then become clearer is when the asphalt gets more texture and becomes grippier. Then I can also apply significantly more lean angle, and that is where the hour of the SportAttack naturally arrives. It also has a steel belt at 0 degrees, meaning that it is wound in the longitudinal direction of the tire. But what it additionally has is that these windings, depending on their position on the tire itself, create different levels of stiffness. That means that in the center we have a tighter winding, and towards the shoulder these windings are simply pulled further apart. As a result, the tire becomes softer there and can build up a little more contact with the ground. And it then benefits not only from this characteristic, but also from the slightly sportier rubber compound that is on it. In terms of mileage itself, it is of course not easy to make a statement now. We did not ride these tires for thousands of kilometers. Instead, I tried them on different types of asphalt with different levels of texture and also with different levels of waviness, so that you can also see the damping behavior. And while we are already talking about damping behavior, that is also an area where the RoadAttack has slight advantages over the SportAttack because it is once again a little softer in exactly this area. It not only brings more stability into the bike, but also creates more self-damping. And in the second step, it therefore also generates more calm. What stood out positively with both tires, just to complete the picture, is that neither tire has to be scrubbed in the usual way. These tires come without a major release layer from the factory, unlike many other tires, and they already have a roughened surface. That saves you from having to take an extremely cautious approach over the first few meters. Especially in cool temperatures, many of you or some of your colleagues will probably already have experienced a tire simply sliding away without you ever even dreaming that it might happen. With the Contis in general, you do not need to have that fear. Both tires have this advantage. To return briefly once more to mileage, we could not test it, but if we look at the amount of rubber, which the RoadAttack clearly has more of thanks to its 1.5mm thicker rubber layer, then you can assume that even if the two rubber compounds were to wear at the same rate, the RoadAttack would accordingly also bring more mileage with it. In terms of the compound, both tires use a single compound mixture, meaning one compound across the entire tire. Then we come to a brief conclusion and answer the question that we already asked right at the beginning: for whom is which tire now better suited? The RoadAttack simply shines with its extremely calming riding behavior. It is perfect for bikes which feel overly agile or nervous by nature, or for very heavy touring bikes. That is exactly where its operating window lies. It calms exactly those geometries down enormously, gives the rider a lot of feedback and confidence regardless of which asphalt you are riding on and regardless of the temperature. And it also gives the rider that confidence in a cold state, meaning already shortly after setting off. But if you have a bike that already draws a lot of stability from its geometry, then the hour of the SportAttack has naturally arrived. It shines with super light turn-in behavior and extremely good line correction at lean angle. Even on very grippy asphalt roads, you then have the advantage that, especially at high lean angles, you find a great deal of grip here while still getting good confidence and feedback. And if you then also want to go to the racetrack from time to time, the decision is clear anyway. In that case, there is no getting around the SportAttack 5. I hope I have been able to give you a brief overview here of how these two tires differ. The decision will probably be different for everyone depending on the intended use. Both have their own area of use and they overlap in really large areas. So tell us, which tire would you rather try or fit to your bike? Maybe you have even already had one of them on your bike. Let us know your impressions. I will say goodbye for now. I hope it was interesting for you. See you next time.